Last week, I had a chance to sit down and have a conversation with author and screenwriter Gabriel Constans. We talked about his novel, The Last Conception, a novel that was converted into a screenplay, and then eventually into a movie, and the movie was produced by Poison Pictures. I spoke to him from his home in Santa Cruz, California. But before we get into the conversation, I just want to remind everyone it's important to subscribe to the channel. And if you subscribe, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma. I am the chief editor for CSMS Magazine, and it's a pleasure today that I have with me a very important writer and screenwriter, is Dr. Gabriel Constans. Am I pronouncing it right?
Oh yes, that is very good. Most people say Constance.
Okay.
I appreciate
So, yeah. So I have a question for you, because I spent the whole time, I can see, I have to be honest with you, I watched the movie twice because I knew I was going to have that conversation with you. One thing really that really strikes me the most is the way you twist and the writing itself. And as a novelist and also a grief counselor, I have to ask you this question. Usually, when it comes to problems relating to sexual orientation, the parents, it's usually the father who resists the most. But in this story, you kind of twist it around. His mom who offers the strongest resistance. My question is, why was that?
Well, that's a good question and a great observation. It actually, I think you're right. I think predominantly it is the father that has the most issues with it, especially if it's a gay son. Mm-hmm. But as far as a woman being gay, it can be pretty equal as far as mother or father.
Okay.
Many times having a difficult time with it. Even though I think in a lot of media, it's portrayed usually that it's usually always the father.
Okay.
But from my experience and the people I know, that it's, you never know how it could be either parent or both parents or neither parent, that they're both, accepting and they're okay with it, or one or the other. It's for different reasons, either how they were brought up or their own religious beliefs or whatever. So that was a good observation. Yeah, because that is something that does happen fairly frequently and many times more. In fact, interesting, a woman wrote me who watched the movie, and she's a Indian woman from Kenya.
Okay.
And she watched the movie and she said, I loved seeing this movie and how the parents were accepting. She said or at least came to be accepting of it. She said, for me, I was disowned by both of my parents.
Really?
And she said, wow. and they won't have anything to do with me now. And so
wow.
She said, so I had really mixed emotions watching the movie. It was really nice to feel supported and that can happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
And also it was sad for me to see that because my own experience was so different.
Okay.
So I gave her as much support as I could, and she knows she's not alone. There's millions of people that have that kind of reaction. So, but yeah.
I read your bio. I mean, you seem to be a very prolific individual. So you're writing novels. You're also a nonfiction writer, a screenwriter. And how do you have the times to combine all these things? And also you're very active on Twitter, on the social media. So how do you divide your time? The reason I'm asking you this question is because I am also a professional. And sometimes I find it's kind of hard, especially when I have to deal with my wife, who wants some attention. So how did you do that, Gabriel?
Yeah, I was thinking as you were saying that about me, I was thinking that sounds a lot like you too. Yeah, I don't know how you manage it, but in some ways it's much easier nowadays because all of our children are grown and live on their own. So that makes a huge change there. So and the grandkids, aren't staying with us all the time. So so that's made it much easier. When I was working full time and had children in the house and doing all these other things, the only way I did it was by not sleeping much. So in that respect, so for nowadays, I just try to sort of set different times during the day. And my wife is a teacher, also teaches at community colleges, and she teaches online classes, and she's a coordinator that teaches teachers how to teach online classes. And so since the pandemic, she's been working
full-time
12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I don't see her much anyway. And she hasn't been too concerned about seeing me. I want to see her more.
I see. But okay, let's go back to the story again. I mean, you conceived the novel. So what really made you decide to turn this into a screenplay and then approach Gabriel for, I don't know how that process worked. Can you really clarify that for the audience, readers of C.S. Smith Magazine?
Of why the book into a screenplay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, I've written a number of other screenplays and had one other one produced and been trying to get 3 or 4 other ones. And I just thought the story could lend itself really well to the screen. And be something that was very different as far as what's available, as far as film about LGBT folks, and also about different cultures' reactions to it. And I thought it was really important to have a non-European experience of what it's like to deal with your parents when you're gay or lesbian or etc. And actually and so I thought it would do well. I really wanted to have that available for people to see. And so it wasn't just the same usual, white people with angst about coming out to their parents. And I wanted it to be that the main part of the film, that the film the main focus wasn't just on her and her sexuality and her partner, but it was more on the family and her interactions and how important family is to her. And how important her family all are to each other and all their own stories. And how that's really what I think is more important than necessarily individual person's issue and how people react to it. So that's why I wanted to do that. And I remember seeing, I don't know if you remember the movie Bend It Like Beckham.
I'm not even seeing it.
Which done years ago, maybe 15 years ago. It's about an Indian British young woman who's a teenager and about 17, 18, and she loves soccer. But her parents are Sikh, and her dad's a cab driver, and her mom's in there very traditional. And she's not gay, but she keeps having to sneak out to go play soccer and not tell them about it. And one day they sees her she has a good friend of hers, this boy who's a friend of hers, and she's talking with him, and she keeps talking about one guy there at the park, one friend of theirs they see playing soccer, and she says, "Oh, he's really good looking," and her friend says, "Oh yeah, I think so too." And she says, "What? You think he's good looking? What do you mean? You aren't gay, are you?" And he goes, "Well, I am." And she says to him, "You can't be gay, you're Indian."
You see the stereotypes?
Yeah, and this was like 15 years ago. This movie came out, and I realized that in a lot of cultures, it's never talked about or dealt with, especially with the family, and that sort of always stayed with me from that movie.
Uh-huh.
And that was another reason I wanted to make this book into a screenplay.
A screenplay.
Was because I wanted to have, you know, it's the same, you know, approximately 10% of people in everywhere across the world.
Exactly.
You know, yeah. So it's not any one predominant person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Gabriel, my question is: so you wrote the screenplay. Before you met Gabriela, have you had some prior professional experiences with her?
No, I hadn't with her. Excuse me, with Gabriela and Callie, who are the producers of Poison Pictures, and also happen to be partners in personal life.
Right.
And they have a daughter also. She's the director of the film, and I'd seen another movie that they had done called Blue, which was their first feature film, and it was really well done. It's very dramatic, serious movie based on a lot of Gabriela's personal experiences of feeling as a young woman, feeling suicidal and trying to deal with that. And she's originally from Brazil.
From Brazil.
And yeah.
Gabriela is from Brazil originally?
Gabriela is Ledesma. And yeah, she's from Brazil. She moved to the States when she was 7 or 8, I think.
Okay.
With her father, he moved here. And she was also in the Navy, in the US Navy for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And then after she got out and her and Callie met, and Callie's an actress, they started making some films. Gabriela went to school and also finished film studies at university.
Right.
And they made this first film based on Gabriela's original, experiences of.
Exactly.
It had nothing to do with sexuality or anything. It just had to do with her dealing with depression and suicide. And it was really, really well done. And so I just contacted them, and I thought, I found out a little bit about her and Callie, and thought they might be a really good match, and they might really relate to this, to this story. And the book is actually more of a romantic drama.
It is. I told you I watched it twice.
Yeah, so the book is different quite a bit actually from how the film turned out.
Right.
So so I wrote, presented the screenplay to them, and they really liked it and were interested in it, and they asked if they could make some changes, and they started making more changes to make it fit more for the screen, and they changed a lot of dialogue and a lot of fair number of scenes, so it became more of a romantic comedy.
Okay.
And so and it worked really well. I thought they did a great job with it. So
yeah, it's really fantastic. I told you I watched the movie twice, but I have a question. Were you part of the auditioning process as the writer, the author?
No, I was not.
Really?
Yeah, no, I was not. They were. We talked about some more well-known named people to try to get for it, but all of them, they didn't have a big enough budget for that to pay anybody. So, so they did all the casting and had all the
actors
and did all the auditions for all the parts, and they're lucky to get Nazanin to play.
Yeah, that's what I see. Some of the great
to play the main part, and she's a really well-known model and married to a famous
Miguel
and everything. And she'd only done one film, I think, before. So this is primarily the main feature. And I thought she did a really good job. And I thought they did an excellent, everybody they cast for each of the parts just seemed perfect.
Yes.
So I was glad they chose and I didn't.
You didn't.
I might have been awful at that. Yeah.
Wow. So my other thing is usually when you, as a writer, you contact a production company for a movie, the promotion process is that being discussed, or just simply just?
Yeah, it's always discussed, and it's always a big one because a lot of producers are not willing to even look at a script unless you either have a very well-known person who's already attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
who's either directing it or starring in it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to get really wide distribution many times,
Mm-hmm.
and publicity for it. You either have to have a lot of money and pay people to do that,
Mm-hmm.
or have somebody that's well known that's in it,
Okay.
to make that more possible. For this, we've done all the publicity ourselves.
Okay.
The distributor that bought it, called High Octane Pictures,
Mm-hmm.
they were really good at getting it on a lot of different places, making it available.
Okay.
Amazon Prime, Vudu, Fandango, YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
DirecTV,
Mm-hmm.
Google Play, iTunes, a whole bunch of places, and they're still
Right.
trying to do it. Still trying to get it on Netflix and Hulu,
Mm-hmm.
because they have the widest audiences. But
Yes, exactly.
yeah, so getting a distributor is always, even to get the movie made, to get a distributor
Mm-hmm.
is another whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And then to get publicity for it. But we've been doing most all the publicity, and actually we've done really well at that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
for the last 6 months since it came out, I've been able to get a number of interviews, about 10 or 12 reviews of a lot of really good
Well, yeah, I see that on the.
magazines and media, and luckily, it's really gratifying that most everybody really enjoys the movie, and been really good responses to it. So it'd be more difficult if the movie was not very good.
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So when
so
you know you have
luckily,
a wonderful product, I mean,
yeah,
it's easy to sell it.
I'm really grateful that they did such a wonderful job, and all the people involved made such a good film out of it.
Uh-huh.
So, because even if you have a really good screenplay, and it doesn't mean the movie will turn out good.
Uh-huh.
So another film I wrote years ago that got produced was called Stelina Blue, and I sold it to this production company, and they bought all the rights. They didn't, do anything with me after they started producing it. And it turned out to be a completely different movie.
Uh-huh.
They didn't use hardly anything that I gave them.
Really?
And it was awful. So
what was your reaction?
oh, when I first saw it, I thought, oh gosh, I don't even want people to see this. Because they only had one scene that I'd written in the entire movie.
Really?
They made the story and changed it completely. So,
and that's not fair.
Yeah, but when you sign over rights like that to a production company, they can do whatever they want with it.
And you know what? Just because you say this, Gabriel, it's the same story when you're trying to publish a novel.
Yeah, you had that experience with?
Yeah, when you sign off into the with the publisher, it's just like you give away your right, your life. They have the right to change whatever they want to change. And they would tell you what this is what's sellable. So in other words, you have to to go along with it if you want your work to be known out there. And sometimes as a novelist, you create your own world, your own universe, with people with feelings and trees and things, and just to sit and watch, to see somebody contend and try to turn things upside down is not always a pretty feeling, it can be.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And especially with larger publishers or even medium-sized publishers, they'll try to fit whichever you've written into a certain category of what they have experienced that sells well. And they might ask you to change the ending, to change the whole arc of the story. It can be so frustrating like that. Because I think I agree. Especially when you write fiction, you're writing the story as you envision it, and you're writing it as you see it.
Yeah,
and I think you need to stay true to that. That it's your story, especially for a novel.
That's why I always think that a writer should always be given the opportunity to participate in an auditioning process, because he's the one. And sometimes the description, the novelistic prose, describe things readers not too often really understand exactly what the writer is trying to portray. But when you are a part of this critical process, the work, it makes a big difference. You know, listening to the author, for example, a character like, this is the main character of the movie, is described as someone who's reluctant to tell her parents about her sexual orientation. And you're lucky in the sense that the producers are very good at interpreting it because it's part of their own personal experiences. Right. Imagine if you were to be dealing with some people who simply do not understand what you're trying to
or a novel that you may have written, and you're trying to have a publisher, and a lot of what's in the novel, because I think a lot of who we are and our own experiences always comes through in novels, no matter how much we are aware of it or not.
Exactly.
But if you're trying to express, share something in your story that you've written in a novel from your experience, and the publisher may not have had that experience or be able to relate to it.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean they should try to change your experience in writing to fit their experience, but be more understanding. Well, how can we present this in a way that perhaps more people would understand that, or so that they work with you, like you were saying. And I think good publishers, they're always willing to work with you that do that. But yeah, some just don't. They want to fit you into a box. And
The Last Conception is not your first novel. You've written several documents before, several manuscripts. Which one was your first one?
Oh, my first novel was that was Loving Annalise, and it was actually all based on a true story of a nurse that I worked with at hospice.
Okay.
Who was originally from Austria.
Okay.
And she grew up on a farm, very poor on a farm, and with a lot of brothers and sisters, and in a small town. And it's all about her experience growing up and going to nursing school in the capital. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Going to school in the capital and falling in love, and it was a romance, and falling in love with one person who became, after she married, became very abusive, and she ended up falling in love with his brother.
Okay.
And then all the stuff that happened to that, and then she moved to the States and continued working here, and they ended up, anyway, so that was the first novel. And then after that was a collection of short stories called St. Catherine's Baby. And then after that was a book called Buddha's Wife.
Gabriel, your stories always seem to have some sort of a multicultural flavor in it. Are you part of the so-called first generation of American whose parents were born outside of the United States?
No, I'm not. My parents' parents are from the States.
Okay.
And mostly German, from Germany, France, and England. Okay. But I have 9 foster sisters I grew up with. And a lot of them have from different backgrounds, and a lot of my friends growing up, and my best friend is Indian American. And I continued learning a lot from her. And her father came from India and was a doctor. And a lot of people that just I grew up with, went out with, and in the community since coming down to Santa Cruz are from a variety of different cultures and backgrounds, or first generation. So Yeah, but I'm personally not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have, I know in Last Conception, anyone who is not an American born can easily relate to the story, because I live here in Florida with a large immigrant populations, whether they're Haitians or Cubans or Indians. I live in suburban Jacksonville, and in Jacksonville itself, there's an entire section where you find Indian restaurants, Indians, the kind of thing that you portray in a movie, you will find it there too. So yeah. So I'm thinking, has the movie been promoted for example, a Florida audience, or maybe any states from the eastern side of the United States? Is it only in the California area, or?
Oh no! It's available all over North America, in the U.S. and Canada, on all of those different platforms, and it's we've been publicizing it, letting people know about it all over on the East Coast and on the South and the Midwest and the West Coast, in a lot of different communities. About as India Express magazine, African American magazines, radio stations, wherever possible, and
just get it out there.
Yeah. So it's been at a variety of places, a lot of multicultural media outlets, and I've made a point of looking and finding that, as well as finding Buddhist communities and Indian communities and Indian American communities. Yeah.
When I read your resume, I see that you've written also nonfiction works. Is there any particular one that you're working on right now? Or?
No, right now I just have been, for the last number of years, working on screenwriting, and then finding producers and letting people know about it. And with the kind folks like you, it's more and more people are able to see it and experience it and see it, what it means to them. So yeah.
And my last question, Gabriel, is let's say, for example, because I'm a writer myself, how do you find it when you spend so many weeks or months, sometimes years, working on the project, and you find out that it's not immediately embraced out there? And you know what I mean when it comes to an author expectation. So how do you deal with sometimes rejection as a writer?
I have learned over the years to let rejections or non-acceptance become just like rain. It falls on you and it just goes off. And if somebody has a suggestion in response to a story or a script, if it's constructive, then I appreciate that. Actually, I'll say, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I think I'll work on that. I think that could make it better. But for the most part, if it's a book or you're trying to find a publisher or a script, I think that, like in a way, what you were saying earlier, you really need to do it for yourself, because it's something important that you need to say and externalize yourself. And whether 10 people ever read it or see it, or 100,000 people do, that you need to be okay with either way.
Exactly.
That you aren't doing it for a certain amount of recognition or acclamation, but you're doing it because the story to you means something and it's important for you to tell. And I think that it's in some ways it's really wonderful the way things have changed, because now you can self-publish, and a lot more people are self-publishing books, and you can do it for very inexpensive now. It used to cost thousands of dollars, but now you can do it for $300 or $400. But it may not be seen by many people, it may not be reviewed as much, but some people will read it and you can have it published, but that's much more accessible than it used to be.
But I always try to encourage writers to, before they can resort to self-publishing, to try other avenues, because you have a steep mountain to climb when you self-publish your work. And
yeah, I agree. I think I'm trying to find a small or medium or large publisher or an agent who will present it to one of them is great. And self-publishing has become less and less stigmatic. Also over the last number of years. It's because it's been around for a long time, but it's becoming more and more accepted. There's not as much, except for reviewing places, still predominant. Well, there's more and more. Yeah, there's still more and more places that review self-published, but all the large reviewers and the majority of the traditional reviewers only publish traditionally published books. That's true. You're right. So, yeah, I would definitely try that first, but you just have to be persistent.
It seems to me that for major publishers, maybe that's their last line of defense. And that heavily contested warfare, so to speak. You know, if you self-publish your work, some academic or literary venues may look down on it, no matter how important it might be. And
I think you sending it to small publishers or mid-sized publishers is good. To almost all the 7 or 8 large publishers that have all these subsidiaries,
exactly,
all these publishing companies that are underneath these.
I'm seeing that,
I think there's 7 or 8. Almost all of those, you have to have an agent to get them to look at anything. So if you want to try to approach them, some you can individually, but the odds are not in your favor. So for a large publisher, it's good if you can find an agent first, which is just as hard as finding a publisher.
So you've been quite successful in terms of finding people to work with you, to accept your work, to admire your work, and I'm one of them. You just got one more admire when it comes to your fantastic work that you produce. Gabriel, it's been such a pleasure to hold this conversation with you, and I'm sure this won't be the last.
I hope not. I really enjoyed it too, and I really appreciate.
Is there anything in particular you want to tell readers of CSMS Magazine?
Just to keep supporting and reading and understanding yourselves and the people around you, and always take a moment to see what it's like by asking and listening, to be in somebody else's shoes and to be in somebody else's life and experience. And I think in a way, writing is one way of doing that. And but joining, being a subscriber to your magazine, or being involved in your community is another really valuable way that people can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much.
Do it again.
Yes.
Wish you good luck, and I'm convinced that the work will ultimately reach the plateau that it takes right now.
Thank you. And likewise, I know we're going to stay in touch.
Oh yeah, no problem. Always.
I can feel it.
Most definitely.
Okay.
All right, Gabriel.
Okay, have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
What?
You're 30, fam. So? What you mean so? We getting old, okay? No 30-year-old woman just brings a friend to dinner. They're gonna know.
I'm gay.
They'll be cool with it. They'll come around.
You don't know Indian parents. It's not going to be as easy as you think.
You are serious with this girl?
I expect you'll be phoning your mother tomorrow morning as well.
But Grandma's dead.
Not that one. We have something to tell you all. We are Buddhists.
You are direct descendants of Buddha, the last ones.
And your grandma's here to make sure that you get pregnant, Savarna. To ensure that the bloodline continues. Shh, I think she's coming. Act normal. Ma!
Brace yourself.
Having a good time, I hope.
I can make my own decisions. I'm a grown woman. Don't tell your father.
Well, let me put it this way. If anyone in the modern world were related to Jesus, this would be the best type of proof you could ask for.
Do Savarna and I have any powers?
I thought that's why we were all here, to see if we have Buddha's superpowers.
I can keep secrets.
My mom's gonna hate that.
You think we were joking?
Babe, you are the only one freaking out.
You even like babies?
Oh, no, I mean, my sister's baby smells good. Does that count?
So, how long have you been gay?